In this lesson, we're going to be multiplying, dividing, adding, and subtracting integers. If you're going to do algebra, you need to be an expert at doing these operations with integers. So let's move on. First of all, we need to make sure we know what the integers are. Of course, that includes the whole numbers. That'd be, let's see, 0, 1, 2, 3, and then the opposites of those. So the rules for multiplication and division are the same. So let's look at those. So first of all, the product or quotient of two integers having the same sign is positive. So if you multiply or you divide integers, two integers, and they have the same signs, you're going to get a positive answer. Let's look at a couple of examples. The key word is same. They both have the same signs. So for example, negative 3 times negative 5, since they have the same sign, you're going to get a positive 15. Negative 4 times negative 12, since they have the same signs, you're going to get positive 48. Number 3, negative 24 divided by negative 3. A negative divided by a negative, you're going to get a positive. And number 4, negative 30 divided by negative 2, you're going to get a positive. So one thing I want you to notice here is when we do multiplication, we can use a dot or we might use parentheses. When we do division, we normally use a fraction form, but it could be written this way. Let's move on. The product or quotient of integers opposite in sign is negative. So again, whether you're multiplying or dividing, if you're working with opposites, you're going to get a negative answer. So we'll look at a couple of examples. Negative 3 times 4, get negative 12. Again, we have opposites here. Number 2, 5 times negative 12. Again, we have opposites. We're going to get a negative 60. On number 3, we're going to divide opposites, so we'll get a negative. Same thing with number 4. Divide opposites, we're going to get a negative. And again, you'll notice the different ways we write multiplication and division. All right, let's go ahead and look at the two rules for addition. So first of all, to add two integers having the same signs, ignore the signs, add the two numbers, and use the sign of the two numbers. Let's go ahead and do that. So for example, negative 3 plus negative 8. So we're going to ignore the signs, and so we're going to work with 3 and 8, and we're going to add them. And then, of course, we get 11, and since the two numbers are negative, our answer will be negative. One way to think of these is in terms of debt. If you owe one friend $3 and you owe another friend $8, then you owe a total of $11. All right, let's look at another example. Of course, 5 plus 7, we don't really need the rule, but it would work. Let's look at another one, negative 10 plus negative 4. I want you to notice here that the parentheses here are there just because we have two signs next to each other, but this is negative 10 plus negative 4. If it were multiplication, there would be no plus in between. So just be careful with a problem like that. So again, we have the same signs. We're going to add the two numbers, ignoring the signs, and then we're going to use the sign of the two numbers. And so we get negative 14. So again, if you owe somebody $10 and you owe someone else $4, you owe a total of $14. All right, let's move on to the other rule. To add integers having opposite signs, again, we're going to ignore the signs, but this time we're going to subtract the two numbers, and then we'll use the sign of the bigger number. Whoops, looks like I ran out of... There we go. Use the sign of the bigger number. Alright, so let's go ahead and look at an example, or a few examples. -3 plus 7. So first of all, these are opposites, and so we're going to subtract 7 and 3. So again, we're ignoring the signs. We'll subtract the smaller number from the bigger number. We're going to get 4. Well, the 7 is the bigger number, so we're going to use its sign, and so our answer is positive 4. Again, if we think in terms of debt, if you owe $3 but you have $7, then you're going to be in the positive. And in this case, that would be 4. Let's move on to another example. This time, we're actually working with very similar numbers. Again, we're going to work with 7 and 3. We're going to subtract, and we're going to get 4. But this time, the bigger number is negative, and so we get -4. And again, this makes sense. If you have $3, but you owe $7, you're in the hole $4. You're in debt. Alright, here's two other examples I'd like you to try, and then you could pause the video and then check your answers. Alright, with -8 plus 1, we're going to take 8 and 1 and subtract them. We get 7. And we want to use the sign of the bigger number. That would be the negative. So our answer is -7. Same thing with number 4. We have opposite signs. So we're going to subtract 7 minus 2. And we get 5. We're going to use the sign of the bigger number, which is the 7. That's going to be positive 5. Alright. We're going to move on to subtraction. With subtraction, there's just one rule. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to change our subtraction problems to addition problems. So here's the rule. To subtract an integer, add its opposite. Alright, so let me show you how this works. So if you have 3 minus 7, you're subtracting positive 7. So we're going to rewrite that as 3 plus -7. The minus becomes a plus, and positive 7 becomes -7. So 3 minus 7 is the same as 3 plus -7. Again, we call this adding the opposite, and of course 3 plus -7 is going to give us -4. Let's do another one. -5 minus -2. So again, we have a subtraction here, subtraction problem. We're going to change it to addition. So our minus is going to become a plus. So notice that happens right there. And our -2 becomes a positive 2. So that's what we mean by add the opposite. And notice here we're going to get -3. Now I'm going to give you 4 problems to try. And then I would encourage you to go ahead and stop the video and then put it back on when you're ready to try it. Alright, so 2 minus 8 can be written as 2 plus -8, and you're going to get -6. -2 minus 8, number 2, can be rewritten as -2 plus -8, and so we're going to add 2 and 8, we're going to get 10, and use the sign of the two numbers. Again, if you owe 2 and you owe 8, you owe a total of 10. And on number 3, we're going to add the opposite. That's going to be 2 plus positive 8, which of course is 10. And in the last problem here, we'll have -2 plus positive 8. And there you're going to get 6. And that is the end of this lesson.